He'll finish his job. I call this meeting to order. We would like to begin by acknowledging that the land on which we gather is a traditional territory of the Anishinaabe, the Ottawa, and the Mississauga peoples. Confirmation of the agenda that the Council of the Township of North Huron hereby accepts the agenda for October 4th, 2021 Council meeting as presented. Do I have a mover? I have Kevin moving, Paul seconding. All in favor? Carries. Disclosure of pecuniary interest. Not seeing any. Public comments. This is an opportunity for any member of the public to speak to any item of business on the agenda. 2 minutes per person. Is there anyone in the audience that would like to speak? And if I don't see your hand, just yell yes. I did not hear a yes, so we shall move on. Consent agenda. That the Council of the Township of North Huron hereby adopts consent 5.1.1, and further that the Council of the Township of North Huron hereby receives items 5.1.2 to 5.3.3 for information. Do I have a mover? I have Kevin moving and I have Rick McBurney seconding. Would anybody like to pull anything from the agenda? Not hearing anybody. We will move on to public meetings and hearings and delegations. Sorry, I forgot to call the vote. All in favor? Carries. Thank you. We would like to welcome Lisa Harper, United Way Perth Huron, Northern Huron Community Committee. If you could just come up, Lisa, if you don't mind just coming up here to the podium.
I have my colleague Susan Faber with me this evening, and she's going to help with the presentation tonight.
Okay.
And Lisa's going to present tomorrow.
Yeah, with permission, I'm going to stay where I am.
It's quite fine. It's quite fine. We understand. Thank you very much.
Well, thank you very much.
Your name again was, sorry?
Pardon?
Your name again was?
Susan Faber.
Okay, Susan, thank you very much.
So thank you very much for having us here this evening to share a little bit more on what we're hoping to achieve here in Wingham and in Northern Huron. Just a little bit about United Way. We are a 100% locally run and operated organisation here in Perth and Huron. We focus on unignorable issues, that's what we call them, things like poverty, mental health, homelessness. And last year we helped over 32,000 people across the region. So if you think of that number, these are your neighbours, they're your friends, they're your relatives. You can't go very far without finding somebody that's been helped by United Way for sure. So we actually have a region by region approach, and that's one of the reasons why we're here with you today. So we have 6 different regions across Perth and Huron. One in Stratford, an area, St Mary's, Goderich, Exeter, and Liston, North Perth, and now here in Northern Huron in Wingham. So the reason why we've taken this region by region approach is that no community is the same. So any challenges that your vulnerable are facing here in Wingham, it's not the same as what they're facing in St Mary's, certainly different from Exeter, Goderich and so on. So if you look at the different struggles that communities across Canada are facing, the top 10 are normally there, but it's a different what is their number 1, number 2 and number 3 priorities. And that's why we focus in on each community. So we actually bring in a staff person, and this is Lisa, who's going to explain what's happening here in Wingham. And they help bring together a community of volunteers, and we work through different priorities as to what is being challenged in that community. Working with different stakeholders, people with lived experience, different social services, to find out what the challenges are. And we come up with a solution, and then we look to that committee and the community to fundraise and to fund that priority. So that's our approach. It's pretty simplistic, but it works specifically for what each community needs. So I'm going to pass it over to Lisa to share where the community is at the moment.
And if you want to hit the next slide for me,
Sure.
Susan, that would be great. So first steps, so we're in the beginning stages of the Northern Huron Community Committee. And for those that aren't familiar with the committee, that comprises North Huron, Howick, and Morris Turnberry. So it's essentially the northern part of the county. So we've recruited to date, we have 8 volunteers on our committee with an excellent cross-section of folks from the 3 different areas and with different backgrounds as well that have joined us. We have a chair for the committee, Kate Proctor, who some of you may know, has joined our committee and agreed to be our chair, so we're super excited to have her on board. We're in the deciding stages on that priority that Susan had mentioned. In our September meeting, we had local organizations join our meeting and share with us their thoughts on what their top issue in the area is that can be dealt with, why that was the top issue, and then we threw them a little bit of a bone and said, if you had $20,000, how would you deal with that situation? So we had a fantastic response and turnout at that September meeting. And for our October meeting, we're now going to take a look and ask for proposals on how can we do a program to deal with those issues that we've arrived at. So again, we're in the planning phases. We have a work plan that we're following through, and it's a work in progress. And we've already done our kickoff, which happened September the 17th, and we had a fantastic response to that. And again, the big thing now is coming up with that main issue that we want to deal with as a committee. And we're also going to, in dealing with that issue, hopefully work with any existing programs and services that are going to be offered in the Northern Huron area. So we're going to be doing some community outreach with the work of United Way. We're going to be doing promotion and increasing awareness around the 211 helpline, Connect Youth Perth Huron, I Volunteer, and My Perth Huron. We're going to be doing some living wage advocacy, and according to some meetings that we've had with United Way, it's currently $17.55, Susan, if I'm not mistaken, but we believe that's going to be going up in November. Don't know the numbers yet, but we do know that that probably will increase. And again, it's about the community awareness around such issues, the unignorable issues, as Susan had said, around homelessness, social isolation, food insecurity, just to name a few of those issues.
And talking more of the issues, I'm saying we're coming up and working with the priority here, but we are already in Wingham, we're already in Northern Huron. Last year we helped 14 women and their children receive shelter and support through United Way. 18 women participated in Passport to Prosperity, and 6 youth were certainly provided with shelter and a fresh start. So there's some examples of how we're already here. When we work with these issues, we are offering instant support through our partners in the community to help people where they are at, but we are working with long-term change, and that's through advocacy, as Lisa mentioned, lots of research, working with municipalities like yourselves and different levels of government. 112 seniors were connected with the community by transportation services. 5,312 people accessed a supported food bank, and 26 youth participated in subsidised activities. So we're already here in Wingham, and we're just hoping to increase our presence and increase our support.
So to date, the volunteers with the support of myself have some goals to achieve. So far what we've done is we held our kickoff on September 17th, and I want to express thanks to North Huron, Morris Turnberry, and Howick, who all had representatives join us for that day. We had 4 restaurants who supported us by taking donations and asking for donations that day within the area, so that was fantastic. The coldest night of the year, this is one of the things that I'm very excited about, is that we're going to be doing this event in North Huron this year. We often have a lot of folks from the Northern Huron area who participate in Goderich and South Huron and other areas, but we're going to have that on the go this year in Northern Huron in February, so we're super excited about that. November 5th, the Women United event is going to be happening. We do that every year. Last year was a full-on virtual event with 300 people who attended virtually. This year is going to be a combination in-person and virtual. And we're hoping, between the two for around maybe the same amount of people again, with an emphasis on that virtual. We're going to continue to do presentations and advocacy work, such as what we're doing here tonight. And we're going to connect with our networks, organizations, and partners to invite donations. And all donations raised by any of the work that the committee is going to be doing go directly back into the area and into the supports and services that are happening and taking place in the area. So anything raised will go right back into the community.
Yeah, we can't reiterate that enough. If you donate here in the area that we're calling Northern Huron, the money will stay here. So Lisa and I invite any questions that you might have.
Thank you very much. I'm just going to speak to it, and then I believe Trevor might want to speak to it, and then I'll throw it out to the council. So I do sit on the homeless task force for the county. And I never realized the situation or what was going on around us. And at the same time that happened, the wife and I, Angela and I, bought a new home up along the river. I took my first walk along the river since I was a teenager. And under the bridge there was signs of, well, obviously somebody was living there. A little further down the trail that I hadn't been on in 40 years, there was a homeless person. I didn't realize it. And then I joined the task force, and we've done amazing things from the county, by the way. But I just want everybody to know this is here. This is now. This is not 50 years ago. So this council wants to decide how it wants to be remembered. Because every council, every person will be remembered how they treated the needy. And so we need to step up to the plate now, not somebody 50 years from now doing it for us. Trevor, did you want to speak to this?
Yes, thank you, Reeve. So the one comment that I will, and I'll mention to council, as council is obviously aware that the Ontario government through the Solicitor General has requested that municipalities do a community safety and well-being plan. And this council approved the plan that was developed in part with the United Way and the 9 other municipalities as it relates to. Where we are right now with that plan is determining a work plan and how we're going to implement that plan. One of the things that I mentioned as to Lisa when I was at the kickoff on September 17th is, the United Way in Huron County has already talked about what the priorities are of the county. And obviously understanding that not the same priorities in Goderich are the same priorities in Exeter, are the same priorities in Northern Huron. The question ultimately is that the work of the United Way, along with the work from municipalities and the federal government and all those other instances of where these unforgettable issues that we have to talk about need to become front and center as to collaboration amongst everyone, because we're all going to be fighting for the same dollar. I mean, ultimately, as Reeve has indicated, municipalities are going to want to support and help the United Way and other issues and other people that have concerns within the society. The biggest thing is not to fight over the same information. And I mean, that is really the coordination that I've had with Lisa, and actually I had the conversation with the CAO from Morris Turnberry and the Deputy Mayor from Morris Turnberry, as well as the Reeve from Howick, that says, look, when we get these minutes and these stuff from this United Way Northern Huron Community Group, they're pounding the pavement figuring out what are the biggest issues. These are things that we can use to help us develop our work plan and develop some funding and something that we can help as to understand what are the key goals of us. Because at the end of the day, the federal or the provincial government is going to request a report from us that shows that we are doing something to improve community well-being. And if we can't show that, we're going to be in serious issues with the Ontario government, because that's what their mandate has been down the process of the legislation. So, I mean, I think this is a great initiative in the sense that the region by region approach is a kind of is a unique one in the sense that, but I think it really hones in on how we look at a region by region approach, but also with a community well-being plan, how do we integrate those two plans together and communicate back and forth to make sure that we're all on the same page? Because if North Huron thinks it's homelessness and Northern Huron United Way think it's mental health, and we're butting up against heads about the same conversation, I know everybody's going to say, well, both of those are big deals, big issues. But I mean, we need to be able to take smaller leaps as opposed to great big leaps forward, and anything we can do for those things are going to be better than anything. So I think from a community well-being plan, that's where I see us kind of unique in this United Way. And I made sure that Lisa has been given some information from us, because obviously she's new to this role as well. And I mean, this community group is new to this area right now too. And I think anything we can do from information perspective is going to help us in the long run.
Thank you very much, Deputy Reeve Sipes. Okay, I open up to council. Questions, comments, concerns? Go ahead, Councillor Palmer.
Yeah, thanks, Reeve. Now, I'm a believer, I firmly believe in helping the needy. So I say my comment is more with an open heart, okay? I'm a believer in a hand up, but not enabling. So how do I fit into this?
Right, so that's where we're meeting people with their immediate need that they have right now, and making sure that they can get through, but then working on long-term change. So we have people out there working 2 or 3 part-time jobs and juggling, working on a minimum wage, still having to access food banks, still having to do, So we're there with supporting the food banks for them right there, but we are out advocating for a living wage. So perhaps the said person, the breadwinner for that family, could perhaps just have the 2 part-time jobs and actually have a living in a way. So that's one example. With mental health, we need to have the counselling there. We'll always need to have the counselling there. But from our mental health report and research that was completed a couple of months ago, we can see that there needs to be a bit of a systems change to help fill in the gaps, because there are lots of gaps. The counselling's there, but the linking from one piece to another is not there right now, even though our counselling services are fantastic. So that's another piece where we're helping for long-term change, so that somebody doesn't have some sort of episode, they're in the hospital, and then it's a week before they can have a counselling session and they get lost in the system. So a couple of examples.
If I may, Reeve, with people with mental health concerns, are you seeing wins?
Well, that's a very hard, and mental health crisis right now, like we have just seen such a huge surge, and we have a lot of, of course, the effects of COVID. We are, but until, once again, I think we see some systems change, it might take a little time. But certainly our counsellors are doing a fantastic job. And when I say our counsellors, we support Family Services, Perth Huron Choices for Change, so it's not actually United Way counsellors.
Okay.
Yes.
Thank you.
Go ahead, Trevor.
One thing I was going to, just to follow up to Councillor Palmer's question is, some of the system issues that are actually happening, I think, municipalities are going to become a louder voice as to, going up the proverbial government ladder, in the sense of, county, Ontario government, federal government. These are things that we as municipalities can't do alone. And I mean, ultimately, when we talk about the living wage, well, $17.55 now, I will guarantee you, if not it close to being $20 an hour, it's going to be pretty close. And what is causing that? inflation. We as a municipality can't deal with inflation because we don't have the monetary policy that deals with that. That's a Ontario government and a federal government issue. Yeah, we can advocate for employers to pay $20 an hour, but if employers can't pay that $20 an hour because of other circumstances in their business, that is an issue of why these things are co-connected. So I mean, arguably, our issues are always going to be how can we help on the ground? Because as you will hear from many community members that I hear, is that, you know why I talk to my municipal councillor? Because you're the one that I know that is in the same, in the same town that I am, you walk the same street. The people in Ontario, in the Ontario government and federal government, yeah, they do walk the same street, but they don't do it every day. And I mean, municipal people see it every day and how we can affect change. So, I mean, that's the concern that we have, but I completely agree with Councillor Palmer. It's hard to see the wins. And I mean, COVID has not helped it. But I mean, what there has been some wins is more advocacy for mental health. The Police Services Board was mentioned last meeting, that the OPP have another crisis support worker right on the front line that is directed to them. So I mean, those are things that are going to get instant change, but it's hard when you have 2 people for an entire county. So I mean, a win's a win's a win. It might be small, but I think we start looking at those little wins as opposed to trying to pick off some huge win. I think we'll be better off for everybody.
Thank you very much, Paul.
Thank you, Dave. Thank you, ladies, for your presentation. I just noticed you gave us numbers there of 6 youth, 112 seniors, but one really caught my eye was over 5,000 for the food. Now, is that just the people that came in, or is that counting like families, like their children?
Susan. Yes, it is. And how we actually help, it's interesting, is that's funding and support for the Huron Food Distribution Centre, which sort of powers the food supply to food banks that choose to use it across Perth and Huron. So it does offer a lot of support here in Wingham. And if you haven't heard of the work that they do, they actually, because it's a distribution centre, they're able to buy in great loads or given great loads, break them down, and it's a very efficient and cost efficient way of getting food out. And so that's where those numbers come from.
Thank you very much.
Anyone else? I'll just end it by saying then this is something that is part of our life. It's not going to go away. It's going to get worse because of inflation, and of course the wages don't go up near as fast as inflation. More and more people are using it. I think it's a fantastic thing, and I know you'll get full support from our council. I want to thank Lisa and Susan for coming out and making this presentation, and we will talk again.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. We appreciate your time tonight.
So when it comes to reports, there's no clerk's report, no finance department report, recreation community services. We have Vicky's going to speak to us on a couple, starting with requests for support for the Festival of Lanterns. Hey ladies, just before we get started, will she be able to run the elevator?
I showed her.
Thank you very kindly. Okay.
So the report that I have presented to you is for the Festival of Lanterns. The Festival of Lanterns has been an annual event for quite a number of years and run by the Wingham BIA. They've asked because of COVID, it has slowly changed, and they're actually going to be doing very similar layout as they did last year. So there isn't gathering areas. The Festival of Lanterns will be having different pumpkins and contests through the schools, which will be then delivered to the front of the town hall with your permission. And viewing can happen there. But in years past, there has been tables and different activities to encourage gathering, and that's what's been eliminated. They're really trying to just have foot traffic up and down Main Street and have a spooky time, and they've asked for our help. So in their letter of request is barricades and pylons. Those are used and usually delivered by the Public Works, and volunteers set them up and take them down according to the road closure plan. So we're not, there's a big bug. Okay. So I should be used to that.
Were
I
you
sit
looking
on
at me when you
Dolphins.
said that?
So the volunteers follow the road closure plan. There's not roads closed, but they are asking that the throughways on either side of the town hall be closed, only really because of safety reasons. So permission for that. And folding tables, those are to display the goblins and different artifacts that they're going to be having displayed. Also, exterior outlets. So the one at the museum is actually an internal one that I usually help turn on and off later in the evening, and the other ones are all external. And extra garbage cans, just to make sure that the event stays appropriate and we have that service for people to use it. There won't be any food served or sales of drinks or anything like that again, just because of COVID. You know, you can do the walk by, and there was some things that were kind of brought to the table, but they really wanted to keep it as safe as possible still this year.
Thank you very kindly. Councilors, do we have questions, comments? Not seeing any. Do I have a mover? Trevor Sipes moves. Paul Heffer seconds. All in favor? Carries. Thank you. And you're on to another one. The replacement of the Dectron.
Good evening, Council. Before you this evening is a report regarding the replacement of the Dectron at the North Huron-West Cast facility. In the spring of 2021, or this year, we did receive a notification from the government that we had been approved for the ISIP funding for investing in Canada infrastructure. And part of that application was to replace the Dectron. If you may recall, the project was to rehabilitate the North Huron-West Cast facility. Originally, the application had been submitted in the fall of 2019, but obviously due to COVID, there's been a bit of a lag time in approval process and things. So in August, we did present a report to council with the transfer payments agreement, which we have entered into with the levels of government. And following that, staff released a tender for the Dectron unit. The tender required the proponents to attend a mandatory, it outlined the specifications of the Dectron and required the proponents to attend a mandatory site meeting on September the 16th. And that after which there was a question and answer period. The tender did close on September the 24th. 2 tenders were received. One was from Montgomery Industrial Services and the other was from Cliffs Plumbing and Heating. Both submissions contained all the required documentation, and based on the bids received, staff are recommending to award the project to the lowest bidder, which would be Cliffs Plumbing and Heating. The new Dectron unit will need to be constructed in the factory specifically for this project. Manufacturing will take approximately 16 to 20 weeks. And it is anticipated that the unit will be installed by the end of February. Because of this project being undertaken or completed in the new year, it will be necessary to transfer the funds that were allocated in the 2021 budget to the 2022 budget. It basically covers it, sorry.
No, that's good. Thank you very much,
Yeah.
Vicki. Questions, concerns, comments from council? Go ahead, Trevor.
Yes, Vicki, this might be a question for you or Donna, but I just want to make sure I'm clear in understanding. So when you talk about transferring 94,000 from the 2021 budget to the 2022 budget, I'm assuming the process is it goes from, we're not going to spend it this year, so it goes into reserves at the end of 2021, and then in 2022, you're going to come and bring it out of reserves in 2022. Is that correct?
Correct, yes.
Okay.
Thank you. Anyone else? Not seeing any. Do I have a mover and seconder? I have Chris Palmer moving. Seconder, please. I have Rick McBurney seconding. All in favor? Carries. Thank you. Next up is Public Works and Facilities. Just while Jamie's coming up, just so councilors understand, this is what I've been kind of harping about for quite some time, that we have a 10 or 15 year push on our vehicles so that when we're doing our budgets each year, we can budget so much per unit, and then when they come due, we're not having to really hike it, especially if it's something like a fire truck, because all of a sudden you got up to taxes for a $3 million fire truck. So Jamie's presenting the first go round of this. Thank you, Jamie. The floor is yours.
Thank you, Reed Bailey. So tonight I am going over the 10-year fleet replacement schedule. So the township requires an updated plan, and as needed, start to changes. And as needed, we need to start changing some of the past policies. So Bylaw 60/2015 is a policy to plan out the replacement of pickup trucks throughout all the departments of the township. The policy needs to be revoked, as based on staff review, the 2015 policy was not followed. Staff recommend that the policy be revoked and that the 10-year planning schedule with all fleet equipment and vehicles be implemented to work in conjunction with the township's asset management plan. So this is a piece that will get incorporated into the overall plan once that's completed, which Donna's going to finish before she leaves.
Well,
The replacement of township fleet assets. It is important for regulating the total cost of ownership and overall fleet performance. This was also indicated in the 2016 asset management plan from the Public Sector Digest. Over the last 5 years, the data and cost in the AMP have changed and required updating. Typically, replacement occurs at a period of time when it is visible that the ownership and operating costs begin to increase. The combination of these two functions produces a U-shaped total curve. Ideally, vehicles should be replaced around the time that annual operating costs begin to outweigh annual capital costs. I did place a chart there that you can kind of see how the operating and maintenance is lower when it's newer, and it increases as it gets older. So reliable vehicles and equipment in good working order are essential to ensure roads are maintained in a timely and professional manner. Without a viable and comprehensive replacement program, management is not able to replace equipment when needed at the optimum replacement time, as illustrated in Chart 1. Staff compiled data to assist in determining the next steps for a fleet replacement schedule for council's consideration. This took into account age, kilometers, or running hours, type of service, reliability, maintenance, and repair cost, condition, and energy efficiency. Public Works staff worked collaboratively to determine these factors and complete the point system as outlined in the APWA Vehicle Replacement Guide. And this was used to apply the same rating to our entire fleet. The attached table that outlines the 10-year replacement schedule has taken into account the need for mandatory and essential services. and this was used from the service delivery review completed earlier this year. A ranking of risk has also been established, placing each vehicle into the appropriate low, medium, and high category. An example of mandatory service would be winter maintenance equipment, and an example of essential services would be street sweeping or roadside mowing. The ranking of winter maintenance equipment therefore has a higher level of risk than that of the sweeper or tractor that performs roadside mowing. Council could reduce or contract out some or all essential services to save money on equipment. So tonight, staff is recommending that council authorize staff to allocate the $100,000 for public works equipment from the modernization funds for staff to purchase one public works truck, half-ton, and look into also purchasing an electric or hybrid truck for the recreation department. Before considering financing options, council needs to determine service levels. Once this has been established and supported, staff can provide a planned schedule. An approved planned schedule would provide staff with the knowledge on how to budget maintenance and replacement during each year. As vehicles and equipment continue to take longer and cost higher amounts, planning becomes a critical step in budget planning. So during the 22 budget discussions, staff will be bringing further information forward as required. There are also additional smaller pieces that need to be replaced in 2022, and these will be brought forward in another report to council. So does anyone have any questions for me?
Thank you very much for that. I would just like to point out that Jamie just talked about a climate-friendly vehicle event. So I believe that was the last one. So we're going to start to fill out some of our obligations or commitments we made as a council when we put together our chart to move forward. So this will be our first attempt at that too. I'm going to open it up to the floor before I ask for movers and seconders. Would anybody like to speak to this? Paul, go ahead.
I'm just curious, you said about winter maintenance, very important on there, and I see 3 of the 7 things that are needed, or 4 of the 7 things that are needed are more or less winter maintenance, but you're putting the 2 trucks first. I'm just curious, those trucks are needed ahead of maybe the sidewalk machine or things like that. I'm just throwing that out there because I know our people are used to having a good road, sidewalks, etc. I'm just wondering if it's a lot, could maybe one of the trucks be put off for another and put more push on a higher maintenance, like those 3 winter ones that are high risk ones.
Through revealing to Councillor Heffer. So last year and the year before, and I want to say possibly it was 2019 and 2020 were the financial information that I was able to obtain. I'm still missing some of 2021, but there was substantial money invested in the sidewalk plows. When looking through that information and what the risks were if a vehicle broke down, or our operations supervisor and our Blythe facility operator, we are able to maintain that sidewalk plow, those sidewalk plows for a little bit longer than if that truck goes, it goes. They're both fairly high and have a lot of kilometers on them as well. That is why I recommended the 2 trucks over the sidewalk plow.
You
Thank you. Trevor, did you have your hand up? Go ahead, Trevor.
When I was reviewing this, I had a question about the annual reserve contribution. So when I looked at the spreadsheet where it says immediate, it says the annual reserve contribution is $429,000, but the 7 items above it don't anywhere close to add up to $429,000. And then on the 10-year one, there was one that says $429,000. So my question is the annual one, like the one that has 7 items that were immediate, are those just pulled from the 10-year one? Like it's not an 800, what I'm asking is it's not an $800,000 annual reserve contribution that we need to provide for these units, correct?
That's correct.
Okay.
When I hid those, when I filtered out all of the columns, so I have the table so that I can filter through condition rating as well as year needing replacement and all that stuff. It doesn't also filter out that end total. That all stays the same. That's why you see that 429 out the 10-year and the 429 on those immediate replacements.
And Reeve, the other question I had was, when we talk about the replacement value of these assets, are we talking the replacement value in present value dollars? So obviously we're taking into consideration what inflation might be or whatever the cost of living may be in 2022, 2024, 2028, whatever the case may be, based on what we think the CPI is going to be
Yes.
regardless of that.
Yes, so I added a 2% inflation over the initial replacement value, which is $2021. So you can see that in so the, hold on, now I can follow, 0714, which is a 4-wheel drive half-ton in the year 2023 is estimated to cost $41,616.
Yeah.
But the 4-wheel drive half-tons 15-35 and 15-34 in 2025 are expected to cost $43,297.
Okay.
So those were that 2% inflation added to every year that piece of equipment's going to be in our fleet.
Okay. And Reeve, just one more follow-up as you know, I guess my question is the comment from the director about the bylaw that needs to be retracted from 60/2015. I mean, I understand the issue about fleet replacement and how we manage it. I would have rather seen it being managed during the budget time, which I think is where we're basically starting to end up, as it relates to another bylaw that, you know, let's be realistic here. We've probably got 4,000 bylaws, and I've used this argument before, and how do we know we're following all of them is the question. You know, as you know, I don't know from me, like, some of these bylaws are older than I've been alive. So, I mean, the question is that how do we know we're making sure that they're being followed based on the policies that this council is putting into place? Because obviously when we put it as bylaw, that's the expectation that it follows suit. So I would rather, instead of it being somehow a bylaw, I would like it to be implemented as we see fit into the budget. Because what I'm hearing is we talk about the budget all the time. And one of the things that this is going to resonate with us during budget time is, what's the easiest thing during budget to remove? Capital. It's the first thing to go, because nobody wants to touch a service. Because the world will end if you touch a service without letting the public know in a grand scheme of time. So the easiest thing to do is to take it from capital. Well, the problem is, we've just seen right here, it's going to take $400,000 a year, and I think last year we only put in our asset management thing, I think we only put 175, maybe 180, I think. We're not even close. I mean, so there needs to be a conversation during this budget cycle as to, you know, it's fine for us to ask Jamie to project 10 years and use that to trade it, but if we're not going to fund it, what's the point? You might as well just take the piece of paper and rip it up, because it's not going to do you any good. So this council needs to establish whether we are going to be consistent on how we're going to fund these things, and if we got to fund them by other means, then we got to find other means to fund it. But public needs to understand that, and I've been a very big proponent of this, is we need to let the public understand if there is a price increase or a tax increase, whatever the case may be, that some of that tax increase is due to reinvesting in their future. That needs to be helped in the discussions as opposed to just simply taking it out because, you know, we tell the public there's going to be a 3% increase and we have 400 people in this audience. Right? I mean, that's the facts that we have to understand. We're like any other company. We have to figure out how we're going to reinvest our tax money correctly and fairly to ensure the people from 20 years from now have the same service level. Because I think everybody here, if we all went out to the public today and asked them what service they want to remove, there isn't one that would say, I'd like to remove one. I've had that for 7 years. You ask the question, you might as well just throw a bomb. Nothing happens. So, I mean, ultimately, those are the conversations, but if we're going to ask staff to tell us how much money we have to fund, we need to be real and figure out how we're going to implement that. Because if we can't, then the plan is useless.
So I'm going to follow that up with just so I think we're on the same path here, Chris. So what Trevor's suggesting is, of course, financing. We all fight with financing. So what he's suggesting is, should this be a guideline or an actual bylaw? Because could we really live with the bylaw? So I'm going to get Jamie and senior staff to answer that, and then we're going to go to Chris. Chris had his hand up. Or do you want to go first? Let Chris go first. He did have his hand up.
Yeah, it relates, thank
Yes,
you.
go ahead.
It's the other end of the barrel of Trevor's comments, which makes sense. It's what we need to do, but we cannot live with 15-20% tax increases. So that's the big balance, and it's going to be very difficult. So, you know, we all know that we need to have reserves to deal with the amount of fleet that we have to replace, and other things, other assets, buildings, what have you, maintenance. But that is going to be our humongous challenge, is we can't live with huge taxes either. We're already taxed very high, just trying to operate, and we have not been putting enough away in reserves. And so that's what we look at, that's what we look forward to.
Thank you. So Jamie, did you want to do a follow-up on that then?
Yes, through Reeve Bailey. So this this plan would be this is like a piece of the puzzle. So this is will be part of your asset management plan, which needs to be reviewed on a yearly basis, which is probably in the asset management policy, which is probably during budget time. So it works perfectly together. So as far as making something like a fleet policy, I would not recommend that, or making it into a bylaw, because fleet, three of the things could fall apart next year, and then there goes your bylaw again, right? So making this a part of, and like, I mean, we can adjust this still to better align with the service levels and the amount of contribution that council feels comfortable with putting in, and then have that incorporated into the asset management plan, which would be the overall plan for water, sewer, buildings, fleet, any of the big ticket items. So it's a living document that you will see yearly and get updated. And as we move forward, you can see the changes that are made in this schedule.
Thank you. Did Dwayne or Carson want to touch on that? Okay, go ahead, Trevor.
One thing I also want to understand, we're making decisions today ultimately because some decisions weren't made 25 years ago. Every council gets dealt with a deal. We've been dealt with a lot of deals, okay? But I mean, arguably, if we knew then, if we knew 25 years ago where we were today, probably those councils would have made some decisions a little different than yesterday. So we have a little bit of a hindsight in the sense of where we are. What I'm saying is we need to stop making capital the scapegoat to keeping taxes low or keeping taxes at a reasonable rate. We need to talk seriously about, we may have to talk about services. We may have to. And I mean, and to say to somebody, we aren't willing to look at it because the grander scheme of the public doesn't want us to look at that. Well, they can't have it both ways. They can't have their cake and don't pay for it. So, I mean, ultimately we need to have this discussion at some point, and I think we've had the conversations this last 2.5 years, 3 years. But that conversation is going to continue, because if we cannot, if, as Councillor Palmer is saying, we are high taxed, yes. The only way to reduce those taxes is get more people, higher taxation, meaning higher income, or reduce services. There's nothing else. The math doesn't work. So I think ultimately I want to say that we have to do the best we can with the information that we have, but we cannot just make easy decision that says, oh, let's put off that truck for a year or put off that snowplow for a year, because if we do that, I will bet you that it'll come back to bite us, because we've just decided that we're not going to follow, and when something breaks, it's going to break in an inopportune time, and we're going to be in real trouble.
Anyone else? So Jamie, hearing what you've just heard, are you going to bring back a bylaw as to what council was speaking to?
To answer that question, really, no.
First I'm a bug, now I'm
No, once this is, once more of the, once you kind of establish what you want to see in this schedule, and I will be bringing another report forward talking about service levels or different financing methods for different types of fleet equipment. That would then go into your asset management plan, and then does that have to be a bylaw? It just is a plan, right? Yeah, it'll just be a plan that you look and review once a year.
Okay, thank you. So going back to Deputy Sype, you're fine with the bylaw as it reads?
The way the recommendation reads, I'm happy with it in the sense we're appealing the one that we're obviously not following, and we're going to actually put it in the asset management policy, which we have to do anyway. So I'm fine with the recommendation as it reads. So I will move it if nobody else will.
Trevor Sype moves it. Do I have a seconder? I have Kevin Faulkner seconding. Last chance for comments, concerns, questions. Go ahead, Paul.
Yes, through you, Lee. So Jamie, I just wondered, could you just explain the mandatory service, right? That's winter maintenance. I noticed that you put that on top.
Yeah.
Of the, and then essential, and then the traditionals don't fall into that at all, right?
It depends on what the service is. Sorry, I did write it out. So for the service delivery review, they base the township service delivery rationale into 4 different categories. Mandatory services are those services that are required to be delivered by regulation or legislation, which is winter maintenance as part of the minimum maintenance standards. Essential services that are those services that, while not mandatory, are required to be delivered in order to ensure public health and safety and are effective functioning the township from a corporate perspective. So one of the examples I used for essential was street sweeping or applying calcium to a roadway. It helps maintain the roadway, but it also helps the dust suppressant. Street sweeping, it cleans up all the sand or silty material that's on the roadway, therefore also minimizing dust and that kind of thing. So that would be an essential service. Traditional services are those services that are not mandatory or essential, but which are typically delivered by municipalities of a comparable size and complexity, for which a public expectation exists that the service be provided. I would consider traditional to be the cemeteries. So that is a traditional service that you would provide, and the residents within our municipality expect, if they purchase a grave site, that it will be there, like when they need it. A piece of equipment will be there to do what it needs to do. And discretionary services are those services that are delivered at the discretion of the township without a formal requirement or expectation, including services that may not be delivered by other municipalities of comparable size and complexity. And I believe some of the examples of that was like, the only one that comes to mind right now is like the museum was like a discretionary service, or like the airport, that type of thing.
Okay, go ahead, Chris.
Yeah, thank you, Reeve. Yeah, Jamie, I think we talked about it on the phone a little bit. When you come up with your report, the next report, can you include certain items like the street sweeper? Can you have it donated? Can you denote on it that it's a possible custom service?
Sure.
Like you can hire?
Oh yeah, for sure.
Because, I think we should be aware of all the different pieces of equipment that we could, hire instead of own. It might help us.
Yep. Good with that, Jamie?
Yep.
Okay, anyone else? Any other questions? I believe I have a mover and a seconder. All in favor? Carries. Thank you. Thank you, Jamie. 7.5 Fire Department, we have no reports. 7.6 Building Departments, we have no reports. 7.7.1 the CAO, Chief Building Official position. I'm going to hand it over to Dwayne for a conversation.
Thanks, Your Worship. So back in June, Council directed myself to develop a draft full-time Chief Building Official job description for Council's consideration. Also authorized the investigation of possible shared services building service delivery options, as well in terms of sourcing a third-party provider for the delivery of drainage superintendent services. So just in terms of, as authorized by Council, we staff engaged in discussions regarding a shared building services arrangement with another municipality. The conversations, I must say, were very positive and productive, and the staff of both municipalities went into it with the intent of reaching a shared services agreement or arrangement. But after a series of meetings, and when we looked at things like workload, expectations of response times to development proposals, and we looked at types of developments in the respective municipalities, and we also had a bit of a conversation in terms of the availability of the building official in the two respective municipalities. It was essentially decided that we'll continue to dialogue back and forth, but in terms of the shared arrangement, essentially we'll continue on our own paths. So as previously indicated, in terms of when you look at building activity and bylaw enforcement, property standards and all that in other municipalities, essentially we would be adequately serviced by a part-time chief building official. But in their current labor market, in terms of recruitment of a part-time chief building official, as much as we could do that, it's not recommended at this time. And in doing that, in looking at that to get a sense of what the labor market is like, did some research on that, and as indicated, like just not even near us, but like the city of Toronto is currently looking for 80 building inspectors. So that just gives you an idea in terms of what the market is like out there. And when I asked in terms of how municipalities are addressing these vacancies, there's, as indicated in the report, there's different ways. Some have advertised and been successful in terms of a full-time CBO, and others have filled their vacancies internally. So And I had a bit of a conversation in terms of a building inspector advancing into a CBO. Certainly possible, certainly doable, but as indicated, when I did some further investigation around that, in terms of staying within our current budget, it would go outside of that. So, anyways, so on the basis in terms of being able, or in terms of a full-time CBO within our current budget is possible, basically, is where we landed. So the whole advancing anyone financially just wasn't coming out as feasible. With respect to drainage services, and prior to the shared arrangement, North Huron, we had a Dietrich engineer appointed as our drainage superintendent. This appointment did work well. Staff, I contacted actually third-party providers, and both have been very responsive in terms of they'd be quite willing to assist us in that regard. And they've also expressed in terms of willing to work with and do some training with our staff. In addition to issuing building and drainage activities, the CBO also provides bylaw enforcement and property standard services through the shared building arrangement. Keppel Creek also provides bylaw enforcement and property standard services. And that agreement with Keppel Creek expires on January 13th of 2022. And January 2022 is going to be at the start of a new council taking office. So in terms of what the recommendation here is to bridge that election, and in terms of getting the CBO in place and up and running and up to speed, that we look at negotiating or extending that for a 2-year period. And if it's determined at a future point in time that the CBO is able to handle the complaints, then we can look at how we proceed forward from that point. In terms of the reporting structure, this is something for consideration. So as you recall, when we looked at the manager childcare position, it's a position that provides a program. And when you look at the chief building official, it's similar in that regard in terms of delivering and providing a service. Whereas in terms of your senior management, in terms of the vision and the future direction and delivering on council's strategic priorities. So the thought here is that, and I should also add in terms of a full-time CBO, that this individual could work with people like Jamie on our facilities. And also there's an opportunity for this individual to work on some of the policies and the bylaws that we need to get updated and revise those. So the thinking here, and for council's consideration, is move the CBO to the director, under the Director of Public Works and Facilities. That individual will then work with Jamie, and in terms of any development proposals that we do get, certainly Public Works is involved, and the CBO would be involved at that point as well. And there'd also be that working relationship that would be established between those two individuals. And then building on that then in terms of our Public Works Administrative Assistant, there is the ability for that individual to assist and support this chief building official on a go-forward basis. I won't get into a lot of the financial impact. It's certainly there in the report, but we could, in terms of, again, depending on the individual and the candidate, certainly $120,000 for salaries and benefits would be reasonable, which is currently what we're budgeting for. And with respect to drainage superintendent's costs, these costs are largely offset by a grant from the Ontario Minister of Agriculture, Food and Rural Affairs. So it's expected that the contract services with the third party will have minimal to no impact on our budget. So, and there's a CBO job description attached there for council's review and consideration as well. So,
Thank you very much. Can I get a mover and seconder, and then we'll have a conversation? I have Kevin Faulkner moving. I have Anita Hitterman seconding. I open it up to council now. Questions, comments, concerns, ideas? Go ahead, Mr. Palmer.
Yeah, thank you, Reed. I'm glad you mentioned that there could be some other duties to perform, like bylaws, some of the 6,000 bylaws that were created before Deputy Site was born. Anyways, can we, I'm just sort of slipping through what his profile is, and is it mentioned in there? I was very concerned that like 100 permits is only a half time, and we all acknowledge that. So what do we do? Yes, I agree that probably a full-time, it is a full-time position. You're not going to find somebody for half unless we can, you know, work with another municipality, but and that's being tried. So I just want to make sure that this individual has something else to do if we can ask them to do it outside of their realm of expertise.
Yeah, through your worship, certainly, I mean, in terms of we can add that certainly to the job description, but in terms of, as the clerk will attest, there is lots of policy and bylaw work to be done. So, and it would be within this individual's expertise, background.
Okay.
In particular, in terms of things around like bylaw enforcement and property standards, for example. So, yeah, so I'll amend the job description to certainly reflect that.
Thank you. Deputy Reeve Site.
Yeah, I was just going to mention the term that has been on every job description that I've ever been on, that I've ever had. Other duties is assigned by management. That is the caveat to everything that you, whatever, that's the catch-all of all catch-alls. So if somebody says, well, that's not my job description, yeah, it is, it's right there. Other duties is assigned by management. I mean, arguably, you're absolutely correct. You know, I mean, 100 permits is not a full-time in person. And I think ultimately what we need to resonate, and we've talked about this as this council, is we're going to have to do a little outside the box thinking on how we attract employees. And I mean, arguably, during COVID, not a lot of people are moving the job market. So the job market is really saturated with a lot of opportunity. There's not a lot of people moving around. And it is an employee job market. Like, employees are they can come and ask for anything. And if you really need them, you will have to pay for it to get it, because that's the market that we're in today. So, I mean, as staff can obviously attest to other duties that we need done, I think, you know, when we talked about, you know, back when the former deputy or the former director of public works was here, and he had a lot to do with facilities, so he took a lot of the facilities work away from, because it used to be with recreation a long time ago. And I mean, this has been a whole compassing aspect about how this works. I think ultimately, you know, a chief building official looking at the building being built will surely he can look at the building when it's already built and see what we need to do to establish and fix and correct and those types of things. So I mean, I'm more than happy with trying to make. I have a hard time thinking that this person's going to be sitting around twiddling their thumbs. Like we are going to be, and if we have Hutton Heights being developed, and we get other things that are being developed in that sense, well, those 100 permits are no longer 100 permits. Those are 140 lots right there in Hutton Heights without any other development. So I mean, yeah, and I mean, we've got potential if it ever comes to fruition in my lifetime. I hope it does. The Maitland Estates development piece, there's 400 pieces. Like, I mean, there's lots of opportunity for this person to grow in. And bylaw enforcement and those types of things, you know, those are contracted services, as we talked about. So, and I mean, we've seen the reports that we get from our property standards and bylaw enforcement. Those are 3 or 4 pages long. So there's lots of work there that can be done, I believe.
Thank you very much. Anyone else like to speak to it? Go ahead, Paul.
Yes, you read. Wayne's mentioned about for the drainage, that they'd be willing to help if things are slow for the start, and if you got a CBO, the third party would be willing to help train the CBO in the drainage end if that's an avenue.
Yeah, through your worship, so in my discussions with the third-party providers, they indicated that if the wish of them is, depending on the individual, if the individual was to have the drainage, then we would incorporate the drainage into the job description, and we would not have a third party.
Right.
In the event that that is not the case, my conversations with third-party providers is that they will train, work with an individual to get them in terms of to become a qualified drainage superintendent. It doesn't happen overnight. There's training that's involved. But if that was the wish of the municipality, we would set up that third-party contract in that form. And it'd certainly be my intention that when we set up that contract as a third party, that we would develop that internal expertise.
And you mentioned if that'd be within the dollar caveat, right? You mentioned that, I think, right?
Yeah, through your worship, in terms of drainage services is offset by a grant from OMAFRA.
Yep.
And then,
Okay.
did I?
Like, I was just wondering, like you had said, if it's within the realm of the dollars you're saying, when you mentioned that earlier, I thought. Like, is it a big cost to do this third party training? I guess that's my question.
Yeah, through your worship, in terms of, I haven't got to the point of actually talking in terms of, the conversation has been about third-party drainage services. What they indicated is that and so I explored with them, would you entertain a proposal or the idea of training somebody? And they indicated yes, but we never went to the point of the conversation in terms of what that would entail and what that would look like. But they certainly would undertake to do the drainage superintendent services. So, and that's something that, would be explored and looked at, and if it makes financial sense, then we would proceed down that path.
Thank you.
Trevor, go ahead.
One question for you, Dwayne, as I guess it's October 4th. We have services till December 31st. What's plan B if we don't have a CBO in place by December 31st or January 1st? Because we won't have any services for CBO after December 31st, according to the cancellation of the cross-border agreement with the CBO with Morris Turnbull. So what does that plan look like?
Yep, through your worship. So plan B is contracted third-party CBO services, and I've been engaging in those conversations as well. And so, either way, we would have CBO services as of January 1st.
Thank you. That's all I needed to know.
Okay. Any other questions, comments, concerns? Not seeing any. I believe I have a mover and a seconder. So I call the vote, all in favor. And that carries. Next is the 7.2 is the employee vacation policy. Dwayne, did you want to speak to that before I ask for movers?
Vaccination policy.
Sorry.
Vaccination policy. I thought it was vacation too.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Yeah,
Yeah, vaccination, that sounds a little better.
it was a needle.
Good thing you're back.
Yeah.
Go ahead, Dwayne.
Thanks, Your Worship. So to meet to meet our obligations under federal provincial law and the Occupational Health and Safety Act, we need to adopt an employee vaccination policy for its workforce. And this is a legislative provincial requirement. And really the intent of that policy is to encourage and promote the maximization of vaccination rates and ensure that all reasonable preventative precautions and measures are in place to protect the health and safety of all employees, volunteers, and contractors. So just For council's general information, in terms of the province has come down with legislative requirements or mandates of certain services for us as municipality. So for example, they mandated in the case of our childcare center, to work in the childcare center, you have to be fully vaccinated, and if you're not fully vaccinated, you have to do an antigen testing and you have to provide a negative result within 48 hours to work your shift. And just on the flip side, if you look at, for example, recreation, again, there's provincial legislation around recreation. It says, you know, if you want to enter our facility, you have to provide proof of full vaccination, dead stop. You're fully vaccinated or you're denied entry. But when it comes to the staff, the policy is silent and it doesn't indicate or specify anything similar or anything like the daycare, where the daycare staff have to be fully vaccinated and or a negative antigen test 48 hours. So as you can see just from provincial, you know, we have one set of regulations that apply to our childcare staff, and we have another set of regulations that apply to our rec staff. And we as a municipality have to have our own employee vaccination policy. So whatever policy it is that council adopts, that policy would apply to all staff. And we did do a bit of a survey with our staff just to kind of get a sense as to what the landscape is like out there with our staff. This is not unlike other municipalities who have undertaken similar exercise. And what we've determined is that North Huron, we don't fall under the categories of fully vaccinated. So we have staff who are not vaccinated. We have staff who are not willing to get vaccinated and do not have an approved medical exemption, and not fully vaccinated but intend to get vaccinated. So that's kind of what the lay of the land is for us as a municipality. The Township's Emergency Operations Committee, we had a conversation, we reviewed and we had a discussion around a draft vaccination policy. And essentially where that committee landed is essentially, and you'll see on the second page of the report, the committee's recommendation is to 1, encourage all staff to get vaccinated, 2, provide staff with information and education on the benefits of vaccination, and 3, continue to monitor, implement, and adhere to provincial requirements and public health agencies. So based on those 3 criteria, staff undertook to develop, and attached to the report is a draft employee vaccination policy for council's review and consideration. In addition to the vaccination policy, the township, we do continue to follow the current mandate, and we continue to have workplace health and safety measures in place. So we do daily screening, we do mandatory masking, we do physical distancing, hand hygiene, and enhanced cleaning. And subject to council's approval of a policy, information, education sessions on the benefits of vaccination will be distributed to all employees, subject to the policy. So as I've indicated, the draft policy is attached there for council's review and consideration. And at this point, just looking for any comments from council, any changes that you'd like to see in that policy. And then whatever the final policy is, we'll bring that back to the October 18th regular meeting for council's adoption.
Okay, thank you very much. So I'm not going to ask for movers or seconders because we're going to have a conversation. So I'd open up to the floor. Who would like to start the conversation off? Go ahead, Councillor Faulkner.
Thank you. Through you, Ray. I personally think it's a disrespect for the people in our municipality if we're requiring them to show their vaccination, prove their vaccination to attend a public facility as an arena or a hall space, and not required of the people that are standing in front of them. I find that is an insult, and I don't particularly think that's correct. I do have a question as to the this hall being a community space. Are we not required to check for vaccinations entering of this public place as well?
So,
before a council meeting?
so under the legislation, council chambers are not defined as a recreation facility. So therefore, the recreation facilities that apply to, for example, the complex, don't apply to your council chambers because it's considered a workplace.
So then this hall has been designated a council space, is no longer a public space?
For council and committee meetings, yes, this is what council has deemed your temporary council chambers, so this would be your council chambers.
We have Vicky coming up to speak to this. So just, well, Vicky's coming up, so at the other time when we're not using it as a council chambers, to his question, is this then a theater and then would have to be checked?
It would be, but as of right now, this is
Is it then,
only for council and committee meetings.
Yeah, go ahead, Kevin.
is there a full cleaning of the facility after everyone's left?
Yes.
Okay. Thank you.
So we're gonna have Vicky speak to it now. Go ahead, Vic.
Through your worship, just a second, I'll come up. I was just going to expand on that you covered. What I was going to say is that in terms, the clerk, in terms of using this space for council chambers, when it's being used for council purposes, it is considered a council chambers, so those rules wouldn't apply. But under the new legislation, theaters, like if it was for a performance or something like that, or practice, yes, we would have to check vaccinations and ID at the door.
I just find that odd that the public's allowed access into this theater, into our chancel chambers, not allowed access into the skating rink with their children. I find
For
that
sure,
a conflict of-
and if I may, the consensus certainly at our emergency operations control group meeting was that there's the provincial mandate. The provincial mandate is certainly flawed and has certainly some room for improvement in various areas in working that out. But as of right now, we've aligned the policy with the provincial mandate.
Thank you. So far I have Kevin saying he'd prefer our staff all be vaccinated, just like the people coming in. Trevor, are you going to speak next? Or who would like to speak next? Go ahead.
Yes, Reeve. So, I mean, I can honestly attest to what Councillor Faulkner is saying in the sense that if we don't mandate our employees that are watching these doors to look for a COVID screen before them let in, isn't it counterproductive? The question I have, the comment that I have is that in reality, if everybody was to keep their own personal health information to themselves, how would you ever know? How would you ever know if somebody was vaccinated or not vaccinated? I mean, arguably, the conversation is that you have a choice whether you get vaccinated or not. The question has been, as the clerk has mentioned, the provincial government put in a policy or mandate that obviously I would argue that the provincial government didn't want to do it to begin with. They were pushing the federal government to implement the vaccine mandate so they didn't have to. And as Premier Ford has mentioned, this is a temporary measure. This is not expected to be forever. So, I mean, I made this very clear at the EOC. I shared a differing of opinion than the Reeve at that meeting as to how we should look to our employees. Arguably, my concern is education. And I look at education as an important part of understanding vaccinations. Because I look at it as, I am not a medical doctor. When I go to the doctor and the doctor tells me I have high blood pressure, take these pills, I don't question them. I take the pill. So the question is, if a medical professional is telling me the vaccine is safe, who am I to say it's not? And I mean, people have the reasons to get vaccinated or not vaccinated. I'm not disowning the fact that people want to or don't want to get vaccinated. I think they have their right to get vaccinated or they don't. The vaccination idea is to keep you safe. It's not to keep your partner safe. Like me getting a vaccine is not helping Kevin. or Councillor Faulkner, it's helping me.
Yeah, it does help.
But the real truth of the matter is my vaccination keeps me out of the hospital. Most likely. It doesn't keep Kevin out of the hospital if he's unvaccinated. My vaccination status is mine. The question is that where are we at today? And I mean, here's the problem that we're going to run into is vaccination mandates could work for some places. In North Huron, it's not going to work for North Huron in the sense that we're already looking for more employees. We've got recreation people concerned that we're not going to have enough staff. Public Works, a whole bunch of other things. It's not simple as just saying get a vaccine or you can't work. It's not that easy. And I feel for people who don't want to take the burden that says, I don't want to get a vaccine. And that's okay. But your vaccine status is your decision on what you do in the municipality. We're not segregating you. The municipality, the province is not segregating you because you don't want to get a vaccine. We're saying those things are not essential services for people who don't have vaccines. Because during the height of COVID, everywhere you've had to go to a vaccine to give this passport were closed during the height of the pandemic. We still had Public Works and we still had other services that the municipality offered. We didn't have recreation and we didn't have restaurants. So, I mean, I feel for people who don't want it, and employees, exactly. Employees have a right to choose whether they want to get vaccinated or not. But we should not be an employer that says, just because you don't want to get vaccinated, you're different than somebody who's got vaccinated. The education to me is more important than everything else.
Go ahead, Kevin.
Thank you, Mr. Reed. Then I think we need to rethink some of our past policies that we've all voted on. We voted on spending tax dollars to police our entranceways of our arenas for non-vaccinated people. But yet we're going to allow our staff to be on the other side of the door in the facility, non-vaccinated. How can we police our taxpayers, but not the people that are in charge of filtering them out? I find that hypocritical.
So I just want to touch on that. Touch on that a bit. This has to do with provincial laws being really screwed up, as far as I'm concerned. So here's the council's decision. We are mandating that anybody entering our facilities have to be. Our choice right now is, do we want our staff to also be fully vaccinated or not? If they're fully vaccinated, they get to go to work. If they're not fully vaccinated, they have to stay home. My understanding is without pay because they made that choice. To the public, as said, the public is going to look at this and say, as the argument's been here for 10 minutes, so I don't have to repeat it. So then I'm told, well, we won't have enough people to run the arenas. Well, if they're not vaccinated, they get sick and they're not going to be there anyway, you're not going to have enough people to run the arenas. This is a tough one, because you got hockey moms out there that there's going to be hockey, hell or high water. But if they're not vaccinated and they're yelling at the person for not letting them in that's not vaccinated, what are we opening up to? Council, we have to make a decision on this. So I just, where do we want to go with this? And Trevor wanted to talk, and then if somebody else would, Chris, you're next.
The one thing I want to be clear is, we are not mandating that somebody stands at the door and checks the vaccination status of our residents. We are not mandating that. The province is mandating that. So the liability lies on us. If we don't do it, and public health wants to come in and see us not doing it, are we as council accepting of a potential fine of 10,000 or 100,000 or 10 million? That's the question. Because we are following the provincial guideline in the sense of we are doing the vaccine passport for the purposes of that vaccine passport. We're not checking it otherwise. We're not doing a full on every municipal building you have to show your vaccination passport status. We're doing it based on what the guideline is on the province. So yes, I can understand where Councillor Faulkner says it's hypocritical. I get it. But we don't have a choice to not, if the municipality had a choice of not showing testing for vaccination policy, I guarantee the recreation staff right now would say, thank God. Because they don't want to do it. It's a freaking disaster. Because they get yelled at every 5 seconds for somebody who's inconvenienced. But that is and that's why I said, if you people have an issue with that, go talk to the great big building in Toronto. Don't talk to us. We're just following the rules. Don't make us the killer of the rule. We are just following the rule as it's laid out for us. So, I mean, that's the part I want to make sure that we're clear. We as a municipality did not put that rule into place. We're following the guideline by legislation of the province of Ontario. Period. That's it.
Thank you, Chris.
Yeah, thank you, Reeve. You're absolutely right, Deputy Reeve, but we're the eyes, we're the face that is going to inevitably face these people. That the hockey mom comes in and she had a heck of a time getting the boys and girls in the car and then forgot her passport. It's not going to go well. And it's going to be a difficult situation, there's no doubt. But something very important to me is that there's a termination to this thing. I don't like it to begin with, but I accept it for the time being. And as long as there's a clause in the policy that follows, and I'm sure there will be, but as long as I need a nod that there'll be a clause that follows the provincial guidelines as to this is, like Premier Ford said, he doesn't want it to last forever. I don't want it to last forever. There's got to be an end to it as long as that is followed.
I can just bring council back into focus. We're not talking about the people coming into our arenas. We're talking about the staffing.
I know.
Vicky, could you maybe speak to this for a few minutes and help the councillors that weren't at the, just give us some comments and that sort of bring us back in. This is about the employees that are not vaccinated. Do they, go ahead, Bush. Go ahead, Chris, while she's coming up.
Thank you, Reeve. To Vicky, about how you know, like you can hardly ask a person these days. So
That's when we want Vicky to touch on too.
Well,
Thank you.
You can't. You want to be careful what
Yes.
go
you
to.
can't ask.
No.
Well, especially in an open session meeting too. So when Dwayne
Oh, I'm not
presented the
for names,
report,
though.
right? Basically, as far as we know, there would be operational concerns. We know we have staff in different departments,
Okay.
but beyond that, I don't think we would want to go down that route with the discussion.
No. So
Alright.
I just want, Vicky, what I was looking for was just a general comment on about the effects of vaccinated versus non-vaccinated and how you feel about it as the department head. With your staff, where do you want to go? Give us some ideas here.
Okay. Councillor Palmer, at the last meeting, as the Reeve indicated, we did indicate at the emergency management meeting that this had come into place on September 22nd. Staff were trying to police it and implement it and police it just on our own programs. It was very difficult to do. We did have a lot of unhappy people coming in. And as a result, we've hired security, which Councillor Faulkner indicated. In terms of the staff, there would be operational implications. I can't get into details and things, but it certainly would affect our operations overall and would result in a decrease in service to our ratepayers. if a mandatory policy was brought in place and no alternatives were provided. For instance, at the daycare, it is in place at the daycare that it's a mandatory vaccination, or they have to go for the rapid antigen testing once a week. And it is operating there, but in terms of our department, it would have operational implications. I'm not sure if that touches on what you
That does, thank you very much. So the question is, do we want to follow the provincial policy as it stands, as suggested here, or do we want to deviate from the policy?
Reeve, I will move the recommended motion that we receive the report from the CAO, and further the council approves the vaccination policy as it's presented, and council directs the clerk to prepare a bylaw for October 18th meeting to adopt the employee vaccination policy.
As to Ontario law. Seconder for that. Paul seconds. Thank you. Any other questions, comments, or concerns? Okay, all in favor? Carries. Thanks, Vicki. Yes, tough one. Okay, moving on. Correspondence, Maitland Valley Conservation Authority. Can I have a mover for this? I have Anita moving, I have Paul seconding. Any questions on this one? Not seeing any, I call the vote. All in favor? Carries. Thank you. Council reports, Reeves activity report. We've taken a lot of criticism for being a good, strong council. If we were a weak-minded, do-nothing council, you wouldn't hear any complaints at all. But some council down the road would have to make up for it. This is the make-up team. We're all working hard. Our staff is working hard. I know, because Dwayne can't get rid of me. And I want you guys to know that I'm proud to serve with you guys. And I don't care what they say out there. Because if you're doing nothing, they will say nothing. But when you do something, they expect more and more and more. And that's all that's happening. They think we can just wave a wand and something's going to happen. We are on overload with decisions we're making. We're getting through them. I'd be the first to admit, man, it does seem to drag on. But it's not because we're not all working hard, and that includes council and staff. So please understand, the only reason you're being picked on is because you guys are doing a great job. If you weren't, they wouldn't even talk about you. Thank you. Council member reports, written update members, anybody that sits on a board. Anything? Go ahead, Trev.
Yes, thank you, Reeve. I just want to make a mention to the council. We did have our first police services board meeting. That was 3 weeks ago now? September 20 or 18th, I think it was. It was the day after, or 21st, the day after our last council meeting. There was a lot of discussion as it relates to, where service levels are in the municipality. From a police services board, we had the detachment commander there to talk about some of those things. I did want to mention to the council, if they are not already aware, that the Huron detachment of the OPP have an office for paperwork and for them to get out of their vehicle and have their lunch and all that stuff. They have an agreement with the Avon-Maitland School Board that they are in the high school up here in Wingham. They have access to that space 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, 365 days a year. So there was lots of discussion at the Police Services Board meeting as it relates to why that potential place wasn't on the main street. And I will leave it at that as it relates to, there was a lot of discussion as to that. But I mean, there's lots of discussion in the Police Services Board as to, our crime rates are actually down compared to last year as a year-to-date function, which is a good sign. Ultimately, obviously, there's the heavy hitters in play. And we did mention, I just received an email not too long ago that we have the reconciliation that was done for 2020, I believe, I'm looking at Don, I believe it was 2020, and that we're going to be, that reconciliation resulted in a money returned of the neighborhoods. I think it was about $200,000. Don't quote me on the exact number. So, I mean, these are good news stories based on our agreement with what we're getting for a service perspective. There was some direction given to me as the chair to talk to the BIAs to ensure that they're happy with the service level that they're getting on the main street, because there was some discussion about increased foot traffic or increased foot patrols and that type of stuff. So we've said to the detachment commander, if we think we need it, we will bring some questions back when our next meeting happens. When I went to the BIA, there was nothing indicated that their service level was inappropriate or they thought they were good. So I mean, at this point, there's obviously concerns in the municipality with graffiti and those types of things. I will say the same thing as I said before. If you are seeing something of suspicion and it is not an emergency, you are to report it to the OPP under the number that's on the website. Obviously, if it's a 911, you call 911. But that's the conversation. The more you report it, the more information gets to the OPP. And obviously, if it's not an emergency, don't kill the messenger in the sense that they may not be there today, but they will follow up, is the understanding that I'm getting from the detachment commander. And if they're not getting that follow-up, feel free to let me, myself, or the vice chair, Councillor McBurney, to know, and we can definitely take that information to the Police Services Board as it relates to service quality. So ultimately, I think these are good news stories from a municipality who, for example, I have written my name on the transfer from the Wayne Police to the OPP as that was my last when I did council. So I put my name to that, and I successively believe in it wholeheartedly that we did the right thing at the time. And I think the understanding that we're getting right now is it is paying for itself. Time will tell when we get out of the agreement and into the billing model what that looks like. But I think we're ultimately moving in the right direction.
Thank you very much, Deputy Reeve. Anyone else like to speak to anything? Not seeing anybody. Is there any comments by members? Just simply conversations. Kevin, go ahead.
Thank you. Through you, Reeve. In the audience tonight we have Gil Garrett, and I want to congratulate him on this week was the last show at the Outdoor Theater for the year. I want to congratulate him on him having the mindset to think outside the box and to think how theater could be brought back to the masses in a safe and productive way. I say bravo to that. I would just also like to mention he was the penner of one of the letters that was in the first part. I don't know if he was aware that at the beginning of the meeting was his chance to speak to anything on the agenda, whether he wanted to add anything to his support of that letter at this if the council would be.
So I will reach out to council with council's permission. If Gil would like to speak, would you like him to speak?
He did by letter.
I just don't know if he knew that there was at the first of the meeting.
Yeah.
He did by letter.
Yeah,
Like,
okay.
would he just rehash what he said, or what? Like, so he's already told us.
No, I just
Yeah.
thought he might not have been aware that was
Yeah.
his choice at the beginning.
Yeah.
So this was going to
Just so
be-
everybody is aware, Gil and I and Dwayne and Rochelle, is it? Are going to sit down at a further date. And I haven't got back to you. It's just been a nutsy week again. So we are going to be sitting down and having a conversation how we can all move forward together. Because I'm a together guy. And I got people that are homeless, and I got people that are starving, and I've got COVID-19. So I'm going to be reaching out for anybody that can help us work our way through the situations we find ourselves in, so that 50 years from now, people don't have to say I'm sorry, because this council is doing everything. As I said, we're a hard-working council that cannot be taken from us. It's just time.
So my request is being denied, or what? I just didn't.
Is most of council okay if Gil speak? Is everybody okay?
Yeah.
Would you like to speak, Gil?
No, wait a minute. You're asking an actor.
to speak.
Really, I think everything that I put in my letter is pretty self-explanatory. So I leave that. I recognize the enormity of it. The only thing that I would add, there is a follow-up letter that I sent just yesterday, just really expressing my profound gratitude to this council and to all of the staff in the township for all the incredible work that you've done to do that very thing of helping us bring this season to life. It's just been absolutely incredible. So that's a bit of a sidebar, public comment. It really is, we're hugely grateful. So thank you for that. And yeah, I mean, in terms of my letter, I mean, I think it's pretty self-explanatory. The only other thing I guess I would say is it's hard work. It's heavy lifting for all of us. And I think the only way we can lift these things is together. So I feel that.
Absolutely. We'll have that conversation, my friend. Okay. Thank you very much. Anyone else have anything? Go ahead, Trevor.
Yeah, Reeve, I just wanted to, I just want to make a follow-up comment to your, comment as a democratic society, we should not expect that everybody's going to be satisfactory to the decisions that we make at this table. Every 4 years, we get that decision, whether they like the decisions we've made or we don't like the decisions we've made. Arguably, from my perspective, is I wholeheartedly accept the letter in the sense of where it's coming from, what it's about, how it's directed. Arguably, we can't have it both ways. We can't have it where, if you don't hear anything, you ask for something, you don't hear it, you get pissed off because you don't hear it. And now when somebody sends you a letter and they may not agree with your decision or whatever, you turn and you say, well, that's not appropriate. And I mean, arguably, we have a shared difference of opinion from what it looks like as it relates to that particular issue that was at the council table a couple of weeks ago. Will that change? Maybe it will. We don't know. But ultimately, from my perspective, the democratic process is what it is. And I mean, these are the residents and our leaders in the community that we want to hear some information as to how they feel about our policy or about our something. I agree. I understand some of the decisions that we make are not going to be really respected and aren't going to be really liked. And normally when we make a bad decision, we hear all about it. When we make a great decision, we don't hear enough. And I get it. But that's the part of this democratic part that we have to deal with. That's government. You never listen to it's the same as the Ontario government and the federal government. You never hear the good things. It's always the bad things. So, I mean, I completely respect the fact of Gil putting the paper, his thoughts, and the conversation in the context of that. The Reeve has made it a point that he is going to sit down and have some discussions. If so chooses they wish me to be in that meeting, feel free. I will be there wholeheartedly. But again, I think I completely respect the idea of democracy. We made a choice. The one comment that I will make is one of the reasons why we did not second the movement to send this to county is because it's a municipal owned road. The county would have just said nothing because they would say it's not our responsibility, it's not our own road. You make your own decisions. We'll deal with the words and the names of the county roads. We have enough problems with our own roads. Don't throw us into the middle of your naming conventions on your roads. So arguably, I just will leave it at that, Reeve, but I thank you. And again, I thank Gil Garrett for the letter, and I've taken wholeheartedly on what is said, and we'll go and move forward from there. So thank you.
Okay. Anyone else? Not seeing anyone else. We're going to move on. Notice of motion. There are none. Bylaws, 11.1 bylaw 76-2021. Do I have a mover? I have Kevin moving. I think it was Rick that had his hand up the second. Thank you. All in favor? Carries. Bylaw number 77-2021, corporate credit card. Do I have a mover? I have Paul moving. I have Trevor seconding. All in favor? Carries. Bylaw number 78-2021, Do I have a mover? I have Chris moving and seconder, please. I have Anita seconding. All in favor? Carries. Announcements. The next regular meeting will be held on Monday, October 18th, 2021 at 6 p.m. in the North Huron Town Hall Theater. A special council meeting will be held on Friday, October 22nd, 2021 at 9 a.m. for the North Huron Town Hall Theater. The next Economic Development and Recovery Committee meeting will be held on Thursday, October 21st, 2021 at 2 p.m. in the theater here. The next Wing and BIA Board meeting will be held on Thursday, October 21st, 2021 at 6:30 at the Hot Stove Lounge in the North Huron West Cass Community Complex. The next Blythe BIA meeting will be held on Thursday, October 28th, 2021 at 8 a.m. in the Blythe and District Community Center. 13 is other business. Closed session number 14. That the Council of Township of North Huron hereby proceeds at 7:52 to an in-camera session closed to the public to discuss the following. You've already seen the lineup. Do I have a mover? I have Kevin moving and I have Rick seconding. All in favor? Carries.
Do we have a break?
5-minute break. 4.5 now.